the more you know, the more you don't know.
Yeah.
The more you know, the more you realize how much there is to know.
Yeah.
It's like how the size of you diminishes diametrically opposite with the amount of things that you actually know.
Yeah.
Ignorance is bliss. The less you know, the better you sleep.
It reminds me of when I was hiking in the Himalayan mountains in Nepal for a couple weeks, and every time I would come to what I thought was the peak or the summit, I was with some friends, but every time we would get close to the summit and we would peak, and I realized, oh, that's not the summit. There's a whole other summit. That's like the teaser. That's the like
The trailer.
level 1.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi.
So today on our episode of On Emergence, we're having beautiful Stephanie Kittell. She is a founder of Rise and Thrive, an empowering holistic well-being guide. And she's also a co-founder of Space of Love. And she can do a much better introduction of herself than I would. And the topic of this episode today is talking about the way that we as humans process emotions in our body and the link between the somatic work that we do and our emotions. But I think I'm going to give at this point a word to Stephanie and do a much better introduction than I ever could.
Thank you, Laura. Yes, I desire for all beings to rise and thrive. And for me, that takes many shapes and many forms, and that can come through embodiment practices, connecting to the body, as you mentioned, connecting body and emotions, comes through meditation practices, through sound and vibrational work, and through using our voice, and also through ceremony and through connecting with nature-based wisdoms, with wisdoms that are indigenous, as we all are in some ways, and that have a lot to offer us in terms of remembering where we came from. And so I believe that when kind of fusing all these elements together, connection to the body, connection to the mind, and understanding the mind, and expressing our voice, and connecting with Mother Nature, and opening our minds and our hearts to other wisdoms, other realities, other perspectives. I think that when all these things come together, we have the potential to really step into a life that is perhaps a little bit more awake, a little bit more vibrant, a little bit more thriving, not just for us, but for our communities.
You mentioned the word awake.
Uh-huh.
What does it mean to you?
Yeah.
What is awake? Because of course, the name of the podcast is On Emergence, and I think that there is a resonation with being awake and emergent. That's why it's kind of like I got a hook in on that word. So do you want to share a little bit more on that? What is awakeness?
Yeah. I feel like if I can speak to my own personal experience with, I think this is where it all starts. I felt like I was sleepwalking through most of my life. And by sleepwalking, I mean kind of on autopilot. I remember when I was living in Toronto, Canada, and working as a corporate video producer. And every day I had my route that I would take to work. And every day I would get to work not remembering how I got there. I think we've all had that experience at some point or another where you've been talking on the phone, you've been cooking dinner, driving to work, cycling, walking, whatever it is. And all of a sudden you literally wake up and realize I've been sleepwalking, I've been half asleep. And so I think that's a feeling we can all resonate with, that feeling of like, oh, I haven't been present. And that feeling of going, I'm awake right now. I know what being awake feels like, and it feels like just fully registering and being aware of my surroundings, aware of my internal experience. It's like right now I'm aware that you're sitting right there and I'm looking into your eyes and I'm seeing all the micro expressions on your face. I'm also feeling the air, and I'm seeing my dog right there, and I'm feeling my own heartbeat and what I'm feeling in my body, all of it simultaneously. And that's feeling awake.
That's very helpful. And I personally went through experience of just the kind of the early stages of being aware of all those different stimuli around in my life. And as you call, being awakening to all those experiences. I personally found it quite overwhelming. And I also know that from the experiences that other people shared with me, that can be quite overwhelming. And people step into this with sometimes excitement to suddenly being aware of there may be some needs that they have been ignored for whatever trigger was. But it can prevent someone to explore that further because of that overwhelm. Is that something that we've been not aware of or subconsciously suppressing? And then we finally, when we give space for those emotions and feelings, the experience, again, I keep repeating the word, is overwhelming. Can you share a little bit more about your experience in dealing with that overwhelm? Because I can imagine it was quite overwhelming. Or if it wasn't, maybe you have some insights that you can share.
There's times where I've said to myself, wow, waking up is really hard work. Like, I kind of want to go back to sleep sometimes. You know, like when you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh, the world seems like too much today. I just want to stay in bed. And
Yes. Yes, I know the feeling.
And to your point, yes, once you start bringing a little bit more presence into your everyday life, and once you start to widen the view beyond just yourself and to, everything, and to those deep-seated feelings, it's absolutely overwhelming. And I want to acknowledge that from a nervous system perspective, we all have a window of tolerance in any given moment. So in this moment, I feel my window of tolerance is quite large. I can handle, some quite large fluctuations between joy, sadness, and I have the capacity to hold that. However, a few days ago, I experienced my window of tolerance was very small. It was like a little tiny portal, and I had very little tolerance for experiencing the range of my emotions and the range of the emotions of my community. And so our window of tolerance changes moment to moment. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that sometimes, we need to shut out certain things. We need to filter. It's like when you live in a city, sometimes you need to have filtering mechanisms, to not overwhelm your system. That being said, when we embark upon a journey of starting to expand that window of tolerance through meditation, through movement, somatic work, through myriad other practices, once we start to embark on that practice, it's work. It's like we're flexing a muscle. We're training that window of tolerance in our nervous system to be like a little wider, a little wider. Oh, it's a little smaller today. Okay, tomorrow it's a little wider. And there's this ebb and flow that happens. I remember I asked my mentor, my yoga and meditation mentor, about this once, because when I was starting to practice regularly yoga posture practices and meditation practices, I was really frustrated because I wanted to feel the bliss that everybody advertises.
Yes, familiar with that.
I'm like, wow, all these yoga teachers and meditation teachers are just blissed out. Why am I feeling the fury of my mind, and my thoughts are wild, and I'm in this yoga posture and I want to kill my teacher. Like, where
I've been there. I love I think most of my yoga teachers, including those that I consider just doing something violent too. Yes.
Yeah. It's like, whoa, there's anger there.
Yes. And what was their response?
And their response was that, when you embark upon these practices, it's cultivating an intimacy with all aspects of you and all aspects of life. So to cultivate that intimacy, you have to be willing to see the parts of you and feel the parts of you that you haven't been. And that might be anger, that might be sadness that maybe hasn't been expressed. That might be feelings of frustration, deep-seated woundedness, whatever it is that's been kind of there in the background your whole life, but it's been waiting to come through. And now when you allow a moment of stillness, a moment of trying to hold a physical posture for longer than what feels comfortable, it comes up, you know, and I think it's really important that we start to have spaces to allow the movement of these feelings within, these emotions, these thought patterns, so that they can reveal themselves. And then when they reveal themselves, it's like they have less of a grip on us, you know, because before they were kind of in the background controlling us in a way. It's like my anger was controlling how I reacted to life. And once I started to see my anger and feel it come through, I started to realize it was just one of the many aspects of me. And I could see my anger arising, shake my body. Anger, I feel you, and here you go.
Yeah, those of you who are just listening to the podcast, I invite you to take a look on the video recording, because Stephanie did demonstrate the body shaking. I think it's one of the techniques that you mentioned before, as a way to process emotion, process anger as well. As one of the easy tools that people can employ. Yeah. And there's also something that you mentioned, the longevity of the emotions when it arises. When we were talking before. Can you share a little bit more? Because that completely blew my mind.
Yes, this is wild. Neuroscience, and I love the bridging of science and spirituality and these modalities that say the same thing. You know, when they all say the same thing, it's something to look at. And neuroscience has discovered that from a very chemical aspect in the brain, when anger is triggered and released in the brain in a chemical response, it lasts 60 to 90 seconds. 60 to 90 seconds.
That's what blew my mind. 60 to, and then if you suppress it, it can take years.
Yeah. Or we feed it. We either suppress it or we feed it. And sometimes we feed it by adding layers of narrative, and you know, we like go on these loops in our mind that never end, and then it perpetuates these feelings in our body. And we feed this anger, and this anger lasts 60 to 90 days or years. And or to your point, yeah, we suppress it. We stuff it down deep, and then like a volcano erupting, it has to come out at some point.
So shaking your body helps. Yeah. I guess the kind of coming from a personal journey is, for me, the first step was to become aware that something is arising. And it's something that comes through. I'm a big proponent of meditation, and there's an entire episode on meditation that I invite our listeners to give it a listen. But it comes first. The first step is to realize you have those emotions. Yeah. And to someone who is just beginning on that meditation, the mindfulness journey, is to understand that at first you may not know what is it that you're feeling, what is it that you're experiencing, and that maybe you notice them as physical sensation in your body. So anger is associated, you know, why we are clenching our wrists. They did MRI scan and how certain emotions are showing in our body. And anger is showing in our chest as like the increased heat, and also in our fists. So there is a reason why we want to punch something.
Ready to fight.
Yeah. So noticing and spotting those physical responses, this kind of physical cues that your body gives, is also useful. It's something that, I personally found really useful. It's just focus on the physical sensation, and you stop the loop. In that sense.
Yeah, because we tend to have we have a tendency, I think, for a lot of us of over-analyzing and wanting to figure everything out, wanting to know everything. And I think the body, this miraculous vessel of the body, is so wise. The body knows what to do. And if we allow it, for example, if we're feeling anger, we let our body just shake, and we take a few deep breaths, and and we allow it to move through, rather than like spending days and days and days ruminating on why we're angry. I feel that a lot of the times that's simply what's needed, is to just let the body do what it needs to do.
So if you're shaking with anger, you literally need to shake with anger. Yeah. You don't need to say that, oh, I'm shaking with anger. It's like, no, you just go and shake in the privacy of your bathroom if you're in the office. I guess that's another thing, like how do you do it in the situation? that are a little bit more public and less allowing to do these type of things. And this is to the point of certain solutions that you mentioned about a bouncing chair.
Yeah, I mean, when I was working in a corporate office, I was always looking for ways that I could integrate some of the wellness work that I was also pursuing. And so one of the things I did was I replaced my office chair with one of those large exercise balls. And actually throughout the day, just to bounce a little while at my desk helped energy to move, so there wasn't this stagnation. But if I was, let's go back to anger. If I was experiencing anger coming through, say I had a really gnarly call with a client, or my boss was in my face, and I would just bounce really vigorously on the chair, and just, I would do it quietly if I had to, or if I had space, I would verbalize and vocalize with the breath. And what I found, because a couple of times my coworkers walked in.
Okay. And they had questions, I imagine.
Yeah, and that's that moment where I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be judged. I'm going to be fired. I'm going to be ostracized from this normal society. How dare I, right? And what I found was actually more of a curiosity. My coworkers in the moment were like, Stephanie, what are you doing? But later they came to me and asked, hey, what were you doing? I'm curious. And I was like, well, I was angry. I was bouncing. I was moving the anger through. I felt better a minute later, and I felt like I rocked the rest of my day. And they were like, what?
Did any of your coworkers get themselves a bouncy chair?
One did.
That's the impact. That's beautiful. I mean, if you change one person's life, that's it. You've completed your mission.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
And that's that.
So happy for them.
Right.
Oh, they're watching them, listening to this. Yes, I was that coworker.
Yeah. And that's that reminder for me that when we allow ourselves to be innately as we are, moment to moment, and feel what we're feeling moment to moment, we're actually giving a wider permission for all of those whom are around us. When someone sees me closing my eyes and taking a few deep breaths, they might get curious, and I feel that we radiate, and they might notice the calm I feel afterwards. And maybe that ripples out and they say, I want to try that, And if they don't, that's okay too.
It's all an invitation that people are welcome to take or not.
Yeah.
There is another point that you mentioned in your story about your office, and it is about using your voice. And I noticed that when you were demonstrating this technique of shaking, and I've noticed it throughout the course sometimes as well, is that you would engage your voice.
Yes.
And what role does the voicing out really plays? And screaming into a pillow, this is one of the things that we're kind of heard, at least, and maybe some of us hopefully have tried it because it's great.
Yeah.
What's the wisdom there in our voice, in expressing this with our voices?
Thank you for asking. To me, this is one of the most potent portals, if you will, of allowing ourselves to feel and connect to our feelings. And I feel that a lot of us, women especially, a lot of us have been told to stay quiet for whatever reason. Maybe as kids we were getting rowdy and yelling in the house, and our parents told us to be quiet, and we kind of carried that forward. I must be quiet all the time. I must be respectful. I must be quiet. It's not appropriate for me to... It's not appropriate. And so more and more, as I've tapped into the power of my voice, I realize that it allows, just like moving the body allows whatever is in the body in terms of stuck and stagnant emotion or trauma. Same with the voice, and especially if I'm feeling like my mind is really overwhelmed, it's full, it's busy, it's bouncing all over the place. Just closing my eyes and humming. And if I do that a few times, just that simple vibration within my skull, it's like it cleanses the mind. The thoughts slow down.
How does that? Together with you, it's like, yes. And it doesn't involve screaming into a pillow.
No. And sometimes we need to And I don't know what just moved, but something just moved. So the active, I mean, if you look at yogic tradition, a lot of Eastern traditions use chanting. And chanting is a way, in fact, actually, a lot of indigenous traditions use chanting and drumming and this like movement of sound. And I believe that it's a way to allow the movement of energies that need to move without trying to figure out what's moving. It's a medicine that we all carry, you know, and I think a lot of us have a relationship with our voice that is maybe a bit more, well, who am I to be heard? Who am I to speak up? Who am I to sing?
Yes, or some people don't like the sound of their voice when they're listening to them, to their voices on the recording.
Yeah, it's a powerful journey to build that relationship with the voice and to use the voice as like a self-soothing mechanism.
Processing. So the question that I have that may come out as the blue, in your experiences and practices, part of the podcast is the question that I am curious to hear people's answer to, because the podcast is what it takes to be a human being.
Sure.
I think you know the question I'm going to ask is from your perspective, especially when it comes to, I don't want to restrain you to just the work that you do, and from your perspective of working with people and their emotions and them owning themselves and taking responsibility and taking control over who they are in their lives.
Yeah.
What does it take from the angle and the space, the very space that you're sitting, what does it take to be a human?
Wow. Thank you for asking such a profound question and for having the curiosity to go there. Thank you. For me, I feel like becoming human, if you, you know, it's like becoming human has been a process of, in some ways, letting go of everything I think I know. I feel that we humans are very intuitive. I feel that we are so interconnected with nature, the seasons, the cycles of the moon, with the emotions of our communities, the feelings of our communities. I think we're so interconnected with all of this. And yet, I feel we get so caught up in trying to know everything that we block that inherent. It's like by trying to know everything, we're blocking that inherent knowing that already exists.
Wow, this is gold. I'm just going to check it in the corner because this is amazing. Wow.
So what I feel, and I just want to, what's coming through in this moment is what I feel about embodiment practices, practices of meditation, which is really just watching the mind, watching the body, practices of, you know, nature-based ceremonies, any practice of spirituality. I feel that all that's really doing is allowing us a little window of space, you know, a little window of space in a rapid-paced life that's like, do this, achieve, figure it out, have the answer, poof, 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 poof. Make money, build a house, make more money, poof, poof, poof. None of that is wrong. And yet I feel like the practices I just listed really just open up a little moment of spaciousness. It's like, oh. But when I put all that aside for a moment, I have everything I need. I know everything there is to know. I feel great, you know, and then we get back into the doing, and that's beautiful too. And we're here to do that also.
It's not just being. A lot of it is being and sometimes doing.
Yeah.
Mostly being and then do a little bit and then come back to being.
Yeah.
To human being versus I'm sure the phrase some people already heard, but we're not human doings. We're human beings.
And yet we do.
Yeah, we do. We do a lot of the time. So we do majority. We tend to associate ourselves with the things that we accomplish, that we do, rather than who we are.
Yeah.
Because that question is such a big question. Who are you? And then people start listing all the things that they do, things like those labels. And those labels can also be quite constraining as well. What would be really interesting, I guess, for our listeners and for our viewers, and the viewers would have advantages to actually see if in case you want to demonstrate anything, any practices, any tools that they can deploy, that you deploy and you educate people, that you guide on their journeys back to themselves, on their journeys back to their bodies, to their emotions. If you can share a little sneak peek as to all the delicious goods that you share with people and your community.
Absolutely. I feel that simplicity is always profound. And so there's a beautiful somatic tool that I use called the thumb hug.
Okay.
It doesn't have any fancy Sanskrit name like buka buka laka laka. No, it's a thumb hug. And
it sounds simple. It induces curiosity.
It sounds simple. So what this is an effective tool. We can use this when we're meditating and we're finding that maybe coming home to the breath in the body is just not available to us right now because the body feels restless, the mind feels restless, and sometimes that can be a scary place. And so also you can do this while you're waiting in line for your coffee, while you're sitting at your desk and you want to take a minute in between meetings. You can do this anywhere at any time and no one will know what you're doing.
So far, so good. My curiosity is at level 10 now. And I want to do it now.
So the great thing is you can just take one hand, and I like to take the left hand and wrap it around my right thumb. The left side is generally associated with our feminine side. And for me, having my feminine side hold the masculine, hold that doing, that busyness, that like, I want to do it all. I want to achieve. I want to reach the top. So wrapping my left hand around my right thumb and then just letting my hands rest in my lap. Maybe they're in front of me if I'm standing. And with that left hand holding the right thumb, with each exhale, you just give it a little squeeze. And with each inhale, you relax that squeeze, although you're still holding it. You might close your eyes, maybe not. And you just allow the breath to be as it is. And it's that little squeeze on each exhale that says, hey, I've got you. I'm here. I love you. You're supported. You have everything you need. We're in this together. Body, mind, spirit, community. And the inhale, as the lungs expand, is an opportunity for you to expand your grip slightly and soften. And the exhale, as the lungs empty of air and the diaphragm contracts, it's an opportunity to give that little squeeze.
Oh, wow.
How do you feel?
I feel held. I feel held. And at the beginning, when you first started explaining, I did it wrong. So I did it on inhalation and I didn't feel the effects. But on the exhalation, there's, wow. I really hope that whoever's listening or watching it have tried it because it's, wow.
And the beautiful thing is you can do it in just 3 breaths, or you can do it in 3 minutes or 30 minutes. It's whatever is appropriate for you in the moment. Maybe you're lying in bed and you can't fall asleep, and that's just a moment to connect. And it's giving the mind something to focus on in a tangible way. So sometimes just dropping into meditation, it's like too much. The mind needs a task sometimes. And so giving it a somatic task where you're actually bringing feeling into the equation. A lot of people I've worked with have found that to be the most helpful tool.
I'm a little bit speechless because I cannot wait to go to bed tonight and be like, I'm gonna try the thumb hug. And is this your invention, or it's?
I picked this up many, many years ago working with a psychosomatic therapist, and I've just been carrying it forward into my work. And she didn't call it a thumb hug. I think she called it like the day tamer or something. And that
I
didn't
like thumb
resonate.
hug.
Yeah.
I like thumb hug. It also sounds playful and a little weird, which is great.
And it's literally what it is.
Yeah, it's a thumb hug. Stephanie, a very important question to you is how do our listeners, how do our viewers can find out more about what you do and more about your work and all the gifts that you bring into the world?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sharing regularly with lots of free micro practices and information and inspiration on Instagram. So the handle is at riseandthrive.steph. And it's the word and riseandthrive.steph. And also my website, risethriveholistic.com.
Perfect. It's in the show notes as well to those people who want to access, which I strongly advise you do.
Beautiful. Thank you. And I want to thank you for daring to ask the questions that it's one of the things when we first met, I really resonated with you, how you were just so inquisitive and so curious and so open. You're not like shutting down anything you hear. You're just open and you're wanting to experience and understand. And I think that kind of curiosity really in humanity as it is today, I think could take us to a whole other level of existence if we could stop creating these walls around ourselves and each other and these divisions and say, hey, let's get curious. What does it mean to be human? Maybe it means something different for you, and that's beautiful. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for saying that and seeing that from this beautiful perspective. Thanks, Stephanie. I'm going to give you a hug.
Yeah.
So people will hear some microphones.
Yeah.
So to those of you who are watching it on YouTube, I strongly encourage you to subscribe to the channel and feel free to leave any comments, any reviews, any feedback, any questions that you might have to Stephanie as well, because she might be open to answering some of the questions that some of you will post in the comments, or whether you have any private questions, that feel free to shoot them either directly to Stephanie or to myself. You can find out more about On Emergence podcast on the website onemergence.com or connect on Instagram with the same handle. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for your time. And thank you so much, our listeners and viewers, for the attention that they gave us today.
Thank you.
That was nice.
Yeah.
And thumb hug.
Thumb hug. It's like, the most accessible tool in the world. Well, the breath is the most accessible tool.
Yeah, but sometimes it is. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's not accessible. Sometimes it's. For some people, it's scary, and some people, including myself, it's like, oh, I don't have time to breathe.
Yeah.
It's the only tattoo I have on my body.
Yeah. Because the mind needs something. It needs an activity to feel like, okay, I'm doing something, right? And the breath for a lot of like people who are working with trauma, sometimes going into the breath right away is too much. It's like too vulnerable.
Do you have anything written about that, like on your blog, or that people can Google some hug?
No, but I should.
Yeah,
Thank
you
for-
should.
I'm going to write a blog about this today.